Thanks for that, Kevin. I appreciate that. So it's really interesting because the previous speaker, storyteller, actually kind of stole my thunder a little bit because I think I was going to talk a bit about
Rodney Foxworth, everybody.
Yeah. No, because my story actually has a lot to do with a similar thing in terms of fighting, trying to end discrimination. But we arrived to it a different way. Right? So I really wanted to attempt to not talk about race or anything like that, because if you know me, if you've read anything I've written before, you know that I have no problem talking about race, racism, issues related to race, right? But there were a couple of things that happened in the past week and a half that got me thinking that this is something I need to talk about. Actually, one of the events was that I went to a talk last week. Kevin was there. With Torre, who is a culture critic. He's got a new book out called Who's Afraid of Post-Blackness, right? So it really got to looking into the question of whether or not there's really a definition of blackness in post-civil rights America, right? And as we know, there's all sorts of ways you can perform blackness. So that got me thinking about it. Then there was actually an article last weekend about a school in Virginia, a small town in Virginia, in which the school was formed as a private school. It was formed because of integration. So really they created this private school that was sort of a haven for white Americans. Right? So in 2008, this school decided that it really wanted to confront the issues that it has with race in this small town. So what they did is they went out and they recruited this kid who was a freshman in high school, 14 years old. He was a quarterback, played football. So they recruited him over to the school so that he could sort of be the ambassador for this school that has a history of, it was established to support segregation. So now you have this young black gentleman who is serving as an ambassador for this institution. Okay? So I had that thought and sort of thinking about this, and it really brought back to things in my life and sort of how I arrived to the fact that I'm a nonprofit manager and writer. What sort of things have led me to want to do these sort of things, right? So the first thing is that until I was probably about 8 or 9 years old, when I realized that, being, as an African American, I was actually a minority. I actually went to this school in West Baltimore that was very Afrocentric, black focused. So I was surrounded by, black children. But more importantly, though, every single piece of literature or image at this school that I went to, this is, kindergarten, pre-K and kindergarten, was of some strong black leader. Okay? So I had these images in my mind of James Baldwin, Langston Hughes, all these great black leaders, and I just assumed at that age that everyone looked like that. Okay? So at that point, though, in West Baltimore, my mom realized that there was no really a great elementary school for me to attend. So my mom, we had a house at the time in Edmondson Village. My mom decided to actually move away from Edmondson Village. She got an apartment in Cross Country. So Cross Country is sort of a predominantly white, a little bit more affluent community, especially relative to Edmondson Village. So I was able to go to this elementary school where at that point I finally encountered what white people looked like. And so that was really a change for me because I had not understood that whole concept. I just thought everyone was like me. And it was very empowering when I think about it later, right? As I grow up, as I get older, my mother, she works for the circuit court system in Baltimore City. And one of the things that she would always force me to do at a young age, talking about elementary, middle school, and through high school, she would tell me to come to her, visit her after school, because there would be a line of young African-American males who were waiting to be seen by a judge. And so that's really a weird thing because I was like 11 years old and I didn't understand what that meant. My mom would tell me these horror stories about what she saw as sort of a tragedy, right, that was happening amongst African-American males, obviously in Baltimore City. So she would have me come to school, I would go to school, I would take the bus back downtown to get picked up by my mother, but I would wait for about 30 minutes and I would literally just sit in the lobby and I would see this happen, this line of guys who are oftentimes just a few years older than me. So that had a heavy impact on me. And oftentimes it took a while for me to realize what kind of impact they would have on me. And so just to take it back, when I think about the school I went to in my pre-K and kindergarten time, the fact that it only till now that I realized that what kind of empowering thing that was for me. And so I could not imagine how you can live your life, understand being surrounded by very positive images about your community and how that can be very empowering, right? So the opposite is also true. And so when you don't see those images, you have the opposite effect. Okay, so then, you know, get a little older, go away to college for a bit in a small town called Lexington, Virginia. I went to a school called Washington Lee, and it was, in a way, I felt a little bit like the gentleman from Virginia, the athlete, the football player, because essentially what happened was I did really well in school. I got to pretty much all the colleges that I wanted to get into. But the deal was that they offered, you know, pretty much they needed to get more diverse, right? So here I was, one of 9 African-American males in a school of about 1,200. So that's an odd thing to have to experience, particularly when you're coming from Baltimore City, right? So despite that, so I dealt with that. I was there for 2 years. I left, came back to Baltimore, completed my studies at UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. And so this, you know, beyond that, you have this story of sort of my interaction with how it is to be young black in Baltimore, or just in general. Okay. So now I live in Hamden. So if anyone's familiar with Hamden, you understand that it's sort of a. You live in Hamden?
No.
Okay. So it's sort of a unique place because now it's really hip, and people want to live in Hamden, and you know, like to go on the avenue and get wine at 13.5 and everything like that, which is cool. But it's got a history of not being so tolerant for folks that look like me. And so, in fact, when I decided to move to Hamden, my parents and grandparents just looked at me and said, "What are you thinking? Like, why would you want to move there?" And the sort of funny thing about Hamden, though, is that as a gentrifying area, it's bringing people that look like me, which I think is odd because typically what happens is people that look like me get pushed out and others come in. But people like me are coming in, which is kind of strange, right? But that said, there's still a lot of tension in Hamden, right? I have 2 white male roommates. In one instance, I'm coming out of Rocket to Venus, which is a great bar in Hamden, all right? And there's these kids, and I say kids, but they're teenagers, adolescents. They notice us and they throw out the M-bomb to me. I don't, you know, in a polite company, I won't drop that. But they call me that, and of course my roommate gets highly offended, and he wants to just go after these guys. And I'd have to pull him back. I'm like, I don't want to do this, right? Because what I realized at that moment is that I had lived most of my life sort of just dealing with that, right? You know, there's a great quote. My favorite author, James Baldwin, says that to be relatively conscious in America and to be black is to be in constant rage. And so I'm going to paraphrase that a bit. But the unique thing about that is that while that's true, you learn how to deal with it, right? You sort of, it's a unique thing because at the one time you want to be angry, you want to express that anger, but you don't do it. And you don't do it in a certain way. What I've been able to do is through my writing, I think, I've been able to communicate that sort of frustration, at least personally from my level, and I've seen it happen with, again, all sorts of great black writers that I learned about initially when I was in pre-K, kindergarten, and also reinforced in my house growing up. So the thing, you know, sort of communicated is that what I've come to realize is that it's, on the one hand, you might see sort of this, you know, you might encounter someone like myself that very, you know, happy to speak with everyone and be very, you know, just have conversation and everything. But at the same time, there's a lot of stuff dealing with that, right? So, you know, we are, you know, sort of that negotiation of sort of being frustrated, but also being accepting of everyone. You know, so a lot of people would say, well, you know, why wouldn't you be angry, right? Or why wouldn't you express that anger? And for me, it's sort of like it's counterproductive. So how do you find ways to change that frustration into something that's productive? And so that's why I've sort of things led me to be a nonprofit manager and to also do the kind of writing that I do. All right, so that's my story.
Yeah.